Hello everyone. I thought I would do a video about this carburetor in front of me. This is a computer controlled Carter BBD carburetor. It's a 2-barrel. You probably won't see very many of these anymore. The only vehicle you probably will find these on anymore is the mid-80s Chrysler Fifth Avenues before they went to TBI engines. And Retro Chad has one of these cars, and he asked me a question about this carburetor. So I'm going to try to just go over it with a video here and maybe explain a little bit about it and just give a little tour of what things are. So maybe that'll help him and anyone else that has one of these carburetors kind of know what's what on these. First of all, this is the front view here. If you look at looking in from the hood, this is the front view of it. It is a 2-barrel carburetor, as you can see on the bottom. This choke plate is up here. You're normally supposed to have a rubber ring here that seals the air cleaner to the top of the carburetor. It does have a divorce choke. This is the choke here. Right here's where the choke rod connects. It's got a rod that goes down to the intake. And you can adjust those by bending the rod a little bit. There's no real adjustment up here. Of course, this is your vacuum pull off for the choke. As you can see, that one doesn't appear to be any good. If you can kind of compress it, then hold your finger over the port so it comes back out, it's got a hole in it, so it wouldn't work. Let's look at the other side of it. This linkage here, as you can see, this is connected to your your choke plate, and look down in here, right there. That's your. Let's go ahead and close the throttle a little bit. That's where your fast idle is. That controls your fast idle. See how it's got little steps on it as it moves, and the inside screw. Just a little bit further inside, that's what I call it the inside. That's your fast idle adjustment screw. This is your curb idle adjustment screw here. Now you see this device over here. It's really just called an idle stop solenoid. It's got this one has, let's see, that's a ground on there. That part's a ground, and this must be the power supply to it. But it does a couple things. I think since it's got a ground on it, it probably sends a reference signal back to the ECM to let it know when it's idling, because it's making, it's making the circuit here, metal on metal. Now that one, well, it's hitting the fast idle. I'll move that around, but see here, that's how it would be right there. Oops. See that there? It's having a hard time seeing it, but anyway, what this does is generally, these can do a couple things. I'm not exactly sure on these carburetors what they do. They can either kick the idle up if it's got the air conditioning on a little bit, extends out, or it may be one of these deals when you turn the ignition switch off, it retracts in a little bit to go ahead and close the throttle blades further, and that's usually to keep it from dieseling. You used to hear cars sit there and run on, and it's really funny to hear cars do that if it's not yours. But they sit there and do that for 5-10 seconds, and all of a sudden at the end of it they go. It's really funny, but that's trying to prevent that. If that's so do some more research on that. I'll find out exactly what that does. But out here you just have some connections. This probably is the cruise control connection here, and this is most likely the throttle connection where the throttle cable connects. And this out here normally is for your transmission linkage. These torque flights they don't use a cable like a Ford does. They use just a rod. And the rod usually, it's kind of what you would think of as a Z-bar arrangement. It pushes back to a point with a joint here, and then it's got another joint that when that pushes back, it pushes down, and then down here it pushes this way. So it's a little complicated, but not bad. back here you got just some general vacuum connections. Probably this is going to be, one of them's going to be PCV and one's going to be your vacuum for your power brakes, and then there might be one for the air cleaner. Well, no, this one here, well, let me see. Not sure on that. You probably have to find a vacuum diagram. I don't have that on my brain right at the minute, but one of these is going to run this choke pull off. It'd have to be a vacuum source, probably this one. And this is, without all the claptrap you see on here, this is basically still just a BBD carburetor. This is what they call a high top carburetor. Chad, if you look at the carburetor that's on your 64 Savoy out there, it's probably going to have this similar carburetor. You can tell by the rounded off bottom of the float bowl here. Probably got the similar carburetor, but it's going to be what they call a low top BBD, because it will not have this housing here. It doesn't have the vent and all that. It's about the level with this, and it'll just have like a little arm that comes across and kind of comes down in the center of it. So just, you know, there's no real functional differences in them except just for more emissions and things like that going on. Let's look at some of the devices on this. This has got a vent solenoid, a purge, a bowl vent solenoid, and this has actually got the wire broken off of it. This carburetor just came to me in a pile of parts, so I don't know what kind of shape it's in, but it's supposed to have a wire on here, and that's just essentially that just means that the computer is going to control, or a relay, most likely the computer is going to control when this bowl vent opens to the charcoal canister, just for emissions purposes. So, but that's what that is. That's just a bowl vent solenoid. Now, Chad asked me about how these carburetors work, and I tried to give a fairly decent answer on the comment section, but I try to expound on this a little more. This is called a stepper motor. I think this is a stepper motor carburetor, and it's got the wiring connector back here. And he was asking me, he said, well, the car has an oxygen sensor on it. How does that work? Well, to make it simple, instead of it just being just a simple mechanical control of the fuel air mixture like with metering rods in the carburetor, like a lot of carburetors have, the older ones, this one goes, it basically, I think the way this one works is it's like an air bleed. It just, I guess the metering rod's probably going to be fixed in here, or the jets, you know, they're going to be fixed, they're not going to move. And the stepper motor is controlled by the lean burn, and like a stepper motor means it just moves in increments, like, you know, in, out, in, out, you know, it just moves this all the time like this, and the computer is trying to control this. Oxygen sensor, and a lot of people don't really know what an oxygen sensor is. They do, but they don't. It's not, an oxygen sensor it's not a variable thermistor type of like a temperature gauge or something like that. It's not like all over, you know, readings. They just, you know, it's a if or. It's either or is the way you look at an oxygen sensor. The oxygen sensor just tells the computer, it sends a voltage reading that tells the computer that it's either leaner than, say, 14.7 to 1, or it's richer than 14.7 to 1. And so, you know, it's not varying around. I mean, you don't have like, oh, it's going up, then it's going back down. It's switching all the time. It'll switch to rich, then back to lean, stay to lean, back to rich, you know. And so this thing is always sending, it's just giving a reference signal back to the computer. And in Chad's case, it's giving us a reference signal back to that lean burn. And lean burn is looking at what the mixture is coming out of the engine, and it's saying, okay, well, the mixture looks lean, it's leaner than 14.7, or it's richer than 14.7, so it adjusts this stepper motor to compensate for it. It tries to adjust the mixture up here. So it's basically, like I said in the comments, it's just for emissions. They're trying to get these engines to run as lean and as clean as possible. That means lean fuel mileage and clean emissions as possible. So the ECM, the lean burn, looks at, you know, it looks at this stuff while the car's up, to running temperature. But when it's cold, it really doesn't do anything. It has to run up past like 165 degrees or so before this all starts coming into play. So, and it doesn't have anything to do with their idle mixture. This carburetor still has accessible idle screws on it, mixture screws. Now, this one it may have had plugs in it originally, but you can still adjust the idle mixture on these. There's your 2 screws right there. But one thing I did notice, it does not have, this is where the port for the distributor advance would be on the older BBDs, and this one doesn't have it anymore because the distributor advance on one of these lean birds is controlled by the computer. So that's most of what there is to one of these carburetors. They're not difficult to deal with. They're not difficult to rebuild. This is your needle inlet and seat, your needle assembly right here. This actually unscrews from the body of the carburetor, and you can take it out as one piece. You don't even have to take the carburetor apart. So if you think you got a flooding problem, then you can try that. Just put a new one of these in without even taking the top off this carburetor. And so yeah, that's a lot of what there is to one of these carburetors. It's just a crude type of mixture control system. I was telling Chad in the comments, I said these run good for a long time, but if it ever starts giving trouble, you usually don't, unless you're a purist, which I don't think many people are on these. The best thing to do is find yourself just a standard BBD and a standard distributor and go from there. It doesn't take much to convert it back over. Hopefully, Retro Chad won't have any problems with his car, so, because they're not really troublesome carburetors. I was telling him the only thing that these BBDs are well known for is the throttle shafts start getting sloppy on them when they got a lot of miles on them. You can't really see it, but like on the, not in the center right there, but like on the ends, because you're always, the throttle cable and the springs, these things have got, I know they got a you'll see in here, this one's got a return spring built into it. The early models, I think like that 64 that he's got, they didn't have that, so you have to be sure that you use the good springs on that carburetor, which on a Dodge and a Plymouth they always come out the front. You got 2 springs usually coming out here to a bracket like of a thing right here, and be sure you keep those, especially on the old car. This one's not, this one's kind of, you see this one's got some spring, but it doesn't go back all the way either, so something to keep in mind there. But anyway, with those spring tension, always pulling on this shaft and it opening and closing so much, they tend to wear these bushings out in here, and they get really bad. I was telling him, you get really bad, then the idle will get sloppy. I mean, you'll hear it kind of, you can even kind of hear it whistle a little bit, and it'll idle at different speeds all the time. It just won't ever really have a good idle. So you can see over on this side. So actually there are no bushings on this. See, that steel shaft just rides right into the aluminum base plate. So you see, Carter Company. I had one of those cars like Chad's got. I had an 86 just like his, and mine ran good. The only problem I had no problems out of it. The only thing it ever did that bothered me is it sounded like it had a lot of lifter noise or something like that every time the engine started before it built up oil pressure. It would kind of clack, 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 clack for a couple seconds, but it ran good. That was a good car. So, okay, everybody. And I know there's not many of you still have these carburetors, but maybe those of you who do, and Chad, maybe this will give you a little bit of an overview on these. And if you need to know more, please let me know, and I'll dig into this and take it apart. So, be glad to do it. All right, everybody, have a good one. Thanks for watching.